ana no hoki ki ngā kōrero I tima te hi hatu e te atanei. Pieri, pare kore te atahu I taua karakia o whakarewengia mai hoki o tātou pāpā enoka. So thanks for opening our karakia this morning. And to Jan here in the council, good to see you all again today. And all our members from the different parts of the rohe here today and acknowledging what we've seen this morning, knowing that there's a lot of work ahead, but we'll plod on with it. So no reira kia kaha ki tātou, mā te atu atunu tātou katoe manaki hei tiaki. Te mange mi ngāne he rapona te tokatū tapu. Whakarungia mai nei mātou ki roto ki te aro hanua, e nei roho ki mātou o ponunga, ko tai ki mūtoko te aro, tēnei rā mūtoko tau manakitanga. Hoi ena uhi o mai toko te manakitanga ki ringi tō tātou huinga, rua marama. Ki noho pai hoki tātou, ki kōrero ko tahi nei anoho ki tātou, e rara manohi te maru o tō tātou kioni hera, o te rohe, te matau a Maori. Re te mange mi ngāne hera pona te tokatūri tapu. Manaki tia mai nau ki rātu kei te noho Maori riana, mai ngā marae kāinga mi ngā hohi pera. Ke piki te ora, te kaha me te mara matanga ki tēnā me tēnā o rātou. Mange mi ngāne hera pona te tokatūri tapu. Whakarungia mai tonu mātou, ki ratu ki te arohanoa, pai here te tonu mātou. Ki ratu ki te rangi māri ngā waka toa, koe nau ki te mange hei tūtuko mai, ai nei aka nei hai. Kia ora.
Kia ora matua. Tēnā koe ako lapi. Ako hami, he mihi ki a koe mō tō kupu whakatuwhera tātou hui, a te kupu o tātou ātoa. He mihi hoki ki o koutou mate, a rātou mate he hinga ana ki te karanga Hinui te pō I tēnei mārama. Hari ki a rātou, I takahi e te huarahi tika mō ngā tangata katoa. Takato I te rangi Māori I te aroha o tātou ātoa. Ka piti hono tātou ho, tonga mate, a rātou ki a rātou. Ka huri ki ngā kānoi ora he taimai I tēnei ata. Ki te hui ngai, ta mahi nei, o te committee Māori, o te kaunihera o te mātawa Māori. Mihi ki a rātou, he noho ai o rātou kāinga mahi, ki te titiro, ki te whakarongo I tēnei hui ngā, ka mihi ki a koutou. So welcome everybody. So we've had a busy morning. For those that are at home watching, we've already had a workshop, a 9 o'clock start. And as we know, we've also got a extraordinary special meeting starting at 3 o'clock for the Regional Council. So we are aiming to finish at 2:30 today, 2:45 at the latest. We need to be able to set up the room for the extraordinary Regional Council meeting this afternoon. So once again, if I cut you off, please accept my apologies now. But we will try to manage our time to make sure we finish at the appropriate time and we're not compressing ourselves towards the end of the day. Once again, can I please ask all committee members to stay online and keep to the business of our agenda, and please try not to waffle. With that, I'll try not to waffle myself. Starting with our apologies, we have a number of apologies. So we have apologies from Rick Barker, Charles Lambert, Mare Apatu, Peter Eden, and Uncle Bill Blake. Were there any other apologies?
No, I moved. Yeah.
Thank you, Api. Thank you, Uncle Hart. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. You've had the agenda. If there are any conflicts of interest, please raise them when we get to the item. I didn't see any in there, to be fair. Alternate members for the 18th of December.
Joella Brown for Heretanga.
Thank you. So Joella Brown she's the nominated alternate for Heretanga. Were there any others? Can I have a mover to accept? Thank you, Haniwai and Michelle. It's us, as far as that one goes. So confirmation of minutes for the 9th of September. So these have been circulated. So unless there are any corrections, omissions, or matters arising, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder from those that were present, please. Thank you, Haniwai, and thank you, Api. There are no other matters arising. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Carried unanimously. So moving down to item 5. Reporta a te takiwā. So can we start with Wairoa first, please? I know we got Hedatonga there first, but since Māre's away.
Good one. Just taking it as read, really appreciated being able to attend the Making Good Decisions course, which is part of our capability building. So yes, really really helpful, especially with us facing a environmental court hearing at the end of the month for the wastewater discharge. So yes, appreciate that, and just the comments about the unfenced waterways, biosecurity, biodiversity. So I've mentioned a few times in the regional council hui about the monitoring and how much there've been over 10 years between monitoring of properties, and these are even dock properties, not whenua rāhui. So if there's no work being done, of course the possum numbers are going to increase. So that was another thing I mentioned. And because we've got the timing, I better not waffle because I'll get in trouble. So yeah, that's pretty much the cultural impact assessment recommendation to the council. The cultural impact assessment is conducted on the impact of mahinga kai of tangata whenua with regard to 1080 drops on whenua Maori to sit alongside the Section 17A report, and must be considered in all decisions around pest control with regard to possums. Why I say that is because if you have inland iwi, mana whenua, and they depend on they depend on their ngahere for their tataka kai. So like pig hunting, deer hunting, all that is their main source of protein. And when you're 1080, that restricts them that access to get that kai, and they depend on that highly. So I just wanted to make that a point, and especially like given watercress, the way itself, it needs to be considered in the overall report, how that impacts on our people when that is forced upon them. So, and the Maori Compass is resourced and run over the Rawa swimming reporting months into Wairoa in line with Objective 1 o Te Mana o Te Wai. And that a cultural impact assessment is also made on mahinga kai practices of tangata whenua in relation to unfenced waterways, in line with Objectives 1, 2 and 3 o Te Mana o Te Wai. And that the Kahungane Executive Wairoa report be received. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any questions for Michelle? And we'll deal with the recommendations after if there are any no other questions. We're happy with Michelle's report and go to the recommendations? I actually just want to ask our officers if they wouldn't mind commenting on those recommendations. Page 8.
Sorry, Chair, got the wrong ones. So, look, at the moment, Hawke's Bay Regional Council doesn't undertake any use of 1080. 1080 is used by Osprey in relation to the TB control program. So the Section 17A report that's been undertaken has been in relation to our existing program, which, as I say, doesn't have 1080. But what I'm happy to do is take up the conversation with Osprey around cultural impact assessments in relation to 1080 drops and whether or not that can be undertaken. In terms of the Maori Compass, over the Lawa swimming reporting months, that's something which we'll come back to and look into. That seems like that may be possible. And then in relation to cultural impact assessment on Mahinga Kai practices of tangata whenua, we would see that as an integral part of the Kohatahi plan change exercise and giving effect to mana o te wai. So happy to take up that discussion offline with Michelle and Katarina.
Thank you very much.
Right. So just for the benefit of our viewers, what we're currently doing is we're getting reports from the various rohe of our Hawke's Bay district. So that's what you're hearing online. Heading through to our next report. Katarina, did you?
Yes, I put a report in.
Can we go to your report first, please?
Look at it red at the top. So the main issue is the Warra Wastewater Environmental Court hearing at the end of this year. Oh, end of this month, beg your pardon. Coordinating the tangata whenua. After reading the report from the council officers, yeah, we've spent 17 different times or hui. We've created 17 different versions of this submission. So it's been quite a big, long time of work. So we can't wait to see the end, and so it's going to be very interesting. So we're inviting the whole rohe to Wairua on the 30th of November, no mai hara mai, to the Wairua Memorial Hall, where we'll be holding our hearing in regards to wastewater. Pretty much as it reads, we've been engaging with the Ministry of Primary Industries to look at our fishing boundaries in Wairua and determining our kaitiaki, and also establishing relationships along the way with our General Manager Lewis Ratapuma, Michelle Bill. So it's just creating that conversation and been to a couple of hui at the Fisheries Forum to go through the process. The other big issue that we're working on is the Ruamoko project that's in partnership with GNS Science and the Tai Whenua. So just really building our capacity around Wairua, around Ruamoko and our safety. What's our evacuation plan? Should we be left for 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 weeks on our own? That's a nice piece of mahi that we're working on at the Tai Whenua. Plus just letting you know that we're having upgrades in our building. We're looking at our health and safety, that we're hosting the Wairua Food Bank, and we continue to do that mahi. That we held our last hui for the year last week. And something that came really strong from the hui was that the Tai Whenua unanimously supports Māori Water at Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Our next AGM for Niki is coming up on the same day as our tātou hui in Te Wairua. It's on the 28th of November. And yes, that's all I have to bring here to...
Any questions for
Amihi?
Katarina?
Just an addition, Mr Chair. Also, Katarina and the Mai Paritu Tai Atu Ki Tūraki Rai. Katarina was nominated by Ronga Mai Wahine whānau to represent the rohe for on the, what is it? It's the National Eel Strategy Forum, isn't it? So
Yeah, the National Eel Forum Working Group.
Oh,
Yeah, to represent the tangata whenua on our coast, Tūraki Rai down to Paritu.
Mahia to Wellington.
Yeah.
So she's one of 4 tangata whenua on this national.
I'm going to stick up for the tuna, and it's for the whole rohe, so I'm expecting that our colleagues will be feeding me with all your tuna kōrero, and I'll be taking it to Duncan Petrie-Ma down at MPI.
And also
Yeah.
thank you to our whanganui Rotu whānau
For supporting my nomination, and to Mahia, my tawhiti. Yeah.
Kia ora.
I think she's humble, she won't mention that, but we're really proud of her. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that. So I'll go on to Mare's report to Tai Whenua Heretaunga. I'm pretty much going to take the report as read. I think the only thing I would raise is the Clive dredging. It'd be fair to say there was disappointment from our Heretaunga whānau, especially our Kuhupariki whānau, as to the general direction of where that dredging is going. As stated at the workshop, tangata whenua are very supportive of the recreational activity that takes place on the Clive River. As we know, we've had many representatives that have been Olympic representatives, world record holders in rowing, and we've also now seen that being, I think, replicated in Wakaama. So, and we really wanted to just make that known that we actually support the recreational use of the Clive and understand why it needs to be dredged. But there is disappointment in the fact that it's still intended to dispose of the sediment onto the foreshore and allow Mother Nature and wave action to take care of disposing of that settlement. I think the other issue is for our Heretaunga whānau was in regards to wanting to see the dredging expanded down past Kuhupatiki and making that part of that overall program. We understand that it will be taken under consideration over the next 10 years once again, but just to remind Council, that will be 30 years that tangata whenua have been waiting to have these issues addressed. Other than that, I will leave Mare's report as is, and any questions?
Mr. Chairman, as for the opposition on Kōpāriki, okay, there's only one family that opposes this, but they do not speak for the majority of our whānau at Kōpāriki,
I don't
or
think,
the trustees, okay?
I don't think they're actually opposing. I think they're just disappointed that we're not extending the dredging down as far as Kuhupatiki. Any further questions?
Yeah. Clive dredging.
Yes, Uncle.
That's been brought up some time ago, I remember bringing it up. But because it was the locals from Clive that were doing the, argument about it, because they said, why is that end of the river left? While everything further up and towards Kōpāriki was getting done up. And I didn't know it was that bad, but it was good to see that mahi being presented to us today to see what can be done. We know how hard it is, you know. It's not as if you can go in there with the dredge and start digging all that weed up. It's humongous. But
Through the chair, I can acknowledge that when this was in front of council, it was a very difficult kaupapa for them to consider and to come to that decision. There was supposed to be a hui earlier this week to sit down through Mare at the Tai Whenua with Akanahi and others from those marae. What I can say on behalf of Chris, Dolly and also Martina is that money is being set aside over the next 3 years in anticipation of Kōpāriki, and there is a strong preference, but that's not confirmed, to move towards a land-based option as opposed to a coastal option. Kia ora, Chair.
Thank you. No further questions in regards to Mare's, Heretaunga's report. Moving to Ahuriri,
Oh, kia ora. So,
verbal.
Yeah, just
just verbal report. So, on the 30th of October, we actually held our AGM we had over 100 people there, so we were wrapped at the representation at our first ever, our AGM,
Our second.
our second AGM, that we had councillors and we also had the Mayor, Kirsty Wise, and we were wrapped that we had a councillor and a very good turnout. And so straight after our AGM, we opened our new building, which is on Mahia Drive. So we were lucky that we've gone and got ourselves a building to start, you know, working now in a better, we're in a better place. And because of the flooding that's just happened, we've sort of been working with all the councillors, the Maori wardens, and we've been doing food parcels and helping out with the recovery from the flood. And with that, we've been leading it through the taiwhena with our chair Hori Reti and our CEO Tania Eden. So we've been lucky enough that we've actually put out quite a few parcels, food parcels, to help a lot of whānau that have been distorted, and some of them that have been moved to Kennedy Park. There's been quite about 90 whānau that were moved from out of their homes during the flood, and now we're just into the recovery to help them out. So that's been a lot of work done by a lot of different, like the community, the civil defence, the Kupinga Order, Tihei Maori Order, and the councillors. And that's just been a lot of people coming to that, and we're actually still working on the recovery to help all those whānau that have to move out of their homes, and a lot of them that can't actually move back into their homes through the flooding. So we've been pretty busy on that, so kia ora.
Through the chair, in terms of the group controller, Hawke's Bay Civil Defence, if Ian McDonald was here, he would probably say this in my stead, and that is to acknowledge Te Tai Whenua, Te Whanganui Orotu, for the outstanding work that you've done in terms of the welfare in particular, and supporting our communities that were affected. Ka nui te mihi ki o koutou. Kia ora, Chair.
Just want to comment on how fast Whanganui Orotu stood up and started to deliver that welfare. That was fantastic. I suppose we're building on from our experiences from COVID, and if you like, just re-kicked into what we were doing during COVID. So congratulations once again to Whanganui Orotu. Are there any other questions for Whanganui Orotu?
I did make a comment. I did say to Kirstine after our hui involving all the agencies that that it was a good time and a good exercise for everyone to come together for whatever may happen in the future, such as an earthquake or whatever. So it was good that we had that big hui at our new premises, and so I just wanted to mention that. So kia ora.
Someone here?
Kia ora. We have a written report, but it didn't get into the time for publication. So, yeah, similar to Whanganui Orotu, we had an AGM in late September, 28th of September, and the result of that was that everybody is very keen and wired up to revitalise all our operations, and so we're busy actually doing that, which starting with our constitution forward and then our systems, because there's so much activity going on that the systems that we had are not coping, and we're not getting the best advantage of opportunities that are coming to us. So we're committed to revamping ourselves in the next 6 months and getting ourselves up in order, and we have a timetable for that. So that's going to occupy us in the governance area. That the local council has produced a Māori engagement strategy, Tūhono Mai, Tūhono Atu, which is a forward-looking policy, and they've just appointed hired a new staff member to facilitate that, and she's been welcomed in a week or so's time. The other interrelated event there is, of course, the work they've been doing on their district plan, and they treated it differently, I think, by process to most others. So they had a pre-notification submission process, and now in the last levels of consultation to make it public next year. So we're calling all of the marae together on the 24th to have one last look at this draft to see what we think of the district plan. On the economic development front, we're dominated by two major projects. One was spoken about before, Ngāra Tupuna, which is the restoration of the pā sites around Waipukurau, and that has wide implications into economic development and into environmental issues, so that it all overlaps, in fact, whatever category you want to put it into. So just putting it here under economic development because it has that spin-off. That's working very well. At the moment it's on schedule. Tomorrow is another meeting to finalise, or not to finalise, but to re-examine the business plan that's associated with that. So there's been a consultation process looking at the business plan, and that's it's going ahead. And as I say, tomorrow is a plan for that. The target is to have it operational by the end of April next year. So it will actually be in position. The importance of this is not just economic and associated things like conservation, and that the importance of it is that this is going to be the first public acknowledgement or visible acknowledgement of tangata whenua presence in Tamatea Central Hawke's Bay. So one of our complaints for a long time has been that there's no image of us anywhere. If you drove through Central Hawke's Bay, you wouldn't think any Māori lived there. There's just nothing Māori in the landscape at all. And so this is a major step forward in public recognition of who and what we are. The other source of economic activity is the activity that sprung post-COVID lockdown under the umbrella of Tihei Tamatea. There's a whole flurry of programs that have all been approved, the finances come through, and they will be in action by mid-January. The start point for all of those is mid-January. So from nothing, we've gone to a whole series of programs that are going to happen. And of course, we're busy creating the infrastructure again while we're reforming our processes to handle this activity. On the environmental side, there's small bits and pieces going on, led by conservation groups, but with hapu engagement at certain levels. So there's they call it ngā peka peka o ngā mutu rākau o ruataliwha. So this is of course about the bats and rehabilitating them and that process there. So we're working with the conservation groups on that. There's the forest area and what you know as Guavas, that area there, there's work beginning there. And more directly, the Whātuma Management Group is in action, and that's a result of the treaty settlement at the dock reserve that was on the western bank of the lake is now under our control, and it is managed by a group called the Whātua Management Group. I bring that up particularly because I hear a lot of talk around the table here and about our lake, as if nobody lives there and nobody actually is working there. Let me assure you that as hapu we are highly active in this area. And we are engaging with some of your officers next week in a direct conversation about where this could go. So that's the main one, and I'd just like to ask Paul to brief you on an initiative out of Porangahau that it also comes out of the treaty settlement arena.
Kia ora tātou. It's just quite exciting. On the northern boundary of Ngāti Kere dock, along with Ngāti Kere, put a marine reserve in. Quite a big area. It's been there for a number of years, and dock up until now has had all the say. However, it's lovely to know and be. We have a Ngāti Kere man has replaced Rod Hansen, and is now the custodian of Angangi, and back down to Parimahu and Blackhead, as it's commonly referred to. And for us, that's a great move for us, Ngāti Kere. It brings us into the picture. It makes the rohe boundaries real, especially with Maka claims coming up, which are not too far off, which for me are going to devastate us as Maori. Cost of fighting claims that were established years and years ago, if we can't refer back to those old boundaries that we've looked after for all my grandfather's life, my father's life, and my life, and my children's life. So that's quite exciting, just having a bit of authority there. And we work with Doc. The other thing we're looking at, and we are going to do, is about the old soldiers. For us 2/8 Battalion and no Porangahau, plenty of soldiers there, and soldiers in all the wars. First World War, Second World War, Vietnam, Malaya, and all those things, even current wars. And parasites. You know, I've taken seriously what you were talking about, James, that you want to give back all those bits of property in that have been where the river was cut off, and that piece of land just sits there. I see it as a whiteback sanctuary, and we'll put to council a very constructive idea of what we might do that, in the hope that you might give that back to us, and we can look at things like whiteback sanctuary, perhaps Kaumātua flats, to me. So I was just saying to Desiree there, we've changed into becoming an old community, an old people's community, but we've got a lot of young people there. And Porangahau was a place where there was shearing gangs and everything. And since I've come home in 2013 to find we're a community of old people, hence I talked to you and Rex about dredging the river as something that we can look to, perhaps mussel farming or who knows where that kind of thing may take us. In an effort to find employment. So when you put your take forward for funding and that, paint that kind of picture for us, that we're in your picture and we're excited for whatever you can do for us in an effort to keep my children there and their children, just like I've had been able to grow up to be who I am today. So, as we move to Christmas time, I thought today I'll come and be a part of our Christmas cheer, and I'm excited that to go forward with the council and the long-term plan and how it's and how you're putting it together on our behalf. So it's just a little bit of what's happening for your efforts out at Porangahau, and a big tautoko for on our behalf of Ngāti Kere. Kia ora tātou.
Do we have any questions for our Tamati representatives? So thank you everyone to our takiwā reports. So we're going to go to item 8. We're going to go straight into our Chair and CEO's reports and stay in the same theme while we're reporting.
Okay, I'll kick it off and then James can follow me. But I'd just like to say in regard to Porangahau, they used to have 2 First Division rugby teams. So
Yes, we did.
And we'd be really interested to hear any ideas about land that we can get back to you. That's a kaupapa which our council's picking up, that we know that a lot of land just lying useless and we're not looking after it. We got it by stealth, where railways were supposed to go and didn't go and all sorts of things. So we'd be really interested in that conversation. Just wanted to talk about climate change, because not only does it go through all the themes of the Regional Council, but we can see that it's really living in front of us now. I mean, we take these big rainfalls, 240 mils of rain in Napier. That's extraordinary. You know, their sewage system hasn't got the capacity to 120 mils, so nothing you build is going to be able to deal with that. And we're getting these extreme weather events every year now, but we're just sort of letting it go. So, you know, I think it's going to be expensive fighting climate change. This council's up for it and certainly up for the discussion. We're not going to deny it at any level. Coastal erosion. Our Coastal Erosion Committee is working diligently away. We are leading the country on our report on coastal erosion, but I have to say to you, we're not leading the country when it comes to how do we pay for it. And that's always the bottom line, isn't it? You have these wonderful ideas, and then you go out to the community and say, right now this is going to cost X, X and Y, and nobody wants to, or you find all these Scotsmen with deep pockets. So we're there, but not there. And I think that the Regional Council is having a discussion of about, you know, these regional issues. Do we pick up the mantle on these regional issues? It's a big discussion for us to have, because some of our councillors don't want to go there, because it means that we are actually having increased rate increases. But my personal view is that we have to. Right tree, right place. And I'm not sure if you've got your minds around that really, but this has been a phenomenal program that Regional Council have put in place. And it's about going to our farmers and saying, plant up that valley and plant up this land that is uneconomic, that cliff face, and keep the sheep and beef industry in place. We don't want to have huge reforestation of just pines covering our ruhi. I talked to the Mayor of Wairoa, and he told me that they'd lost another 12,000 hectares over the last 12 months to pines. And we all know the big sales that have taken place, and every farm that goes up, who the top bidders are, it is pines. So we have to get in here really fast, and because keeping the sheep and beef industry is really important for our region as well, but also stopping this incredible erosion which is just destroying everything coastal. And you know, we talked about the Karamu, and I say to Māki and Aki, you know, we'll never solve the problem at Koapāriki, never. We'll have to solve the problem upstream, and if we just keep on dredging, I mean, we've got to dredge as short term, but long term, it's just not a sustainable option. We've got to stop the silt coming down into our streams and rivers. So right tree, right place is really about that. Water security, I see water security as a major issue, but it's not just about building hard dams, or which is what we have to do in the short term to keep our economy going, but it's about the right tree, right place. It's about stopping the water coming down. And I talked to a grower last night, and he alluded to the meeting in Twyford when Mike's brother spoke, and you could hear a penny drop. And he said, well, you know, he knew what he was talking about, and he's dead right. We have to stop the water flowing out at such a rapid rate. We have to have better farming practices. And I just want to say one quick thing. Haniwai and I went for a tour to Central Hawke's Bay to our fellow councillor's farm, Will Foley, and he's doing sustainable farming like they do in many places in Europe with mixed crops, and his cattle look fantastic and everything looked fantastic, but it wasn't until the very end that he made a comment which I thought was overwhelming. No fertiliser on his farm. No fertiliser. So if he can do it, and we're going to be looking at his numbers and he can make a profit, I don't see why other farmers can't get onto this. We've put a lot of money into our Future Farming Trust, and they are very focused on that. But, you know, a lot of these things I'm very positive that we can win. We do have a lot of problems facing us, but we can win. But it'll have to be in the future, and we're looking for young people to come forward and take up the cudgel, because old buggers like me won't be around forever. Hey, Harmy. One of the things that I am really interested in doing in the next couple of years, though, is increasing our partnership with Hapus from Regional Council. And you'll all be aware, and I'm really proud of what we've done at Hawke Park. Not what we've done at Nahiwi and I drove it, really. And now it's embraced into right through the 4 hapus that are involved, and we don't have anything to do with it. But it is a partnership, a park, a historical park, which is 50% owned by the hapus and the Regional Council, and the management has a management committee, and they meet regularly, and that's where those catchment people come in, because you have to put resources into that, where they to help them get through it. But it is a wonderful example. When I was at Rongamahini with Haniwai and another road trip, seems like we're on lots of road trips, it came up. Rongamahini actually said, we love that model you've got. Can we do some things with you on that model? And so we looked at that big hill. What's it called? Tokatau. We thought, why don't we start there? But it's just having a vision and having a dream and saying, how do we do this? We have been approached by Petapi, who did the Celestial Compass, how they can get involved with the hapu that are involved, and I know Koe Paraki is one of them, and there will be other hapu, how they can get involved similar to the Hawke model. So we're leading the country on that, and I think we should drive it hard and continue to lead the country. Taronga Park failed. We failed to get a couple of people in the hapu across the line that it was a good idea, but we're not giving up. And but just to say, the consultation, we thought it was a fantastic idea, but the consultation was not successful, and we've got to look at other options. But I'm determined to stay on the kaupapa as it is. So we're not going to give up. Haniwai and I also visited Wairoa, their Hawke scheme, and they're really, the treaty group there is driving that forward. It's really important because with deforestation that's going on, we've got to look at land change, and they've really picked up the cudgel, and you know, I'm really proud of them, the way they are just driving this forward and making it work at an international level, so that it's environmentally sustainable, and it provides really good jobs for the people in Wairoa. The other one that we met up there, which is a really good update, the Mahi Predator-Free program. We're looking to put a governance group together of Rongamā Wahine, the local farmers and us, the Regional Council. So it's another classic example of us dealing with mana whenua in partnership, so they're there in the governance level, and the state puts up the money by the way of government and Regional Council, because we have just amazing opportunity in Mahi to do something absolutely internationally special. But we've got to get all the farmers on board, and there's a couple of difficult ones there. But it's like everything. Eventually you win. If you're right, eventually you win. But it is a long journey on all these things. I've been here now for 7 years. And, you know, it takes time. It just takes time. But I think if we work together, we'll get there.
Any questions for
James might have.
Rex? I basically just one, not so much a question, Rex, or just a comment in regards to Torongo Park. As you say, the discussions between mana whenua and their potential landowner donors, although we kind of disagree on a couple of issues. Myself and Councillor Rick Barker have not given up on finding a model that actually answers everybody's needs and wants as to what they're trying to extract out of this establishing of this park. So through Councillor Rick Barker continuing to engage with the potential donors, we believe we can get there and meet everybody's expectations.
Just on that, Mike, just so everyone, we have a way through and where we're going to keep it open for the hapus to come in at any time in the future and get involved in the partnership. I think I want to acknowledge your incredible work you did there, and Rick. Rick, who's one of the government's most experienced treaty negotiations, said it was the most difficult one he'd ever done. So, yeah, we'll get there.
Yes. Were there any other questions for Rex? Otherwise, we'll move to the CEO's report. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, I'll run through this at a bit of a clip. When I last met with committee in September, we were obviously coming off the back of the COVID lockdown. There was a huge amount of uncertainty around the economic climate that we were in. And at that stage, in fact, back in the sort of the middle of the lockdown, people might remember that the Treasury was forecasting unemployment to peak between 16 and 23% as a consequence of COVID lockdown. And so, look, the good news today is that the economic situation is not nearly as dire as had been predicted. But look, I would also note that the future is uncertain with COVID, and while New Zealand's doing very well at the moment, that things could change in the new year. Across the region, we're seeing things return largely back to normal. Domestic tourism has come up really well with the work of Hawke's Bay Tourism on promoting the region. The sort of expenditure happening in our shops and businesses is actually up on last year across the board, and we've had a reasonable export season. But this coming summer, we've got some real risks around the recognised seasonal employer scheme and having enough workers to pick all the fruit that's required in the region, and people will see the campaign that's running around that. I'd also just note that the drought took a lot of livestock out of the region, and it will be a slow process of rebuilding the stock numbers on our whenua. So there is going to be a period of some economic headwinds. We do have 2,500 more people on the job seeker benefit in the region than we did this time last year, and Hawke's Bay is actually faring one of the worst in terms of unemployment at the moment nationally. So we're at 6.7% unemployment as a region, which is not as bad as it could have been, but it's still higher than we'd want it to be. We of course froze rates as we discussed last time, and we were expecting a $6 million shortfall in our budget this year. It's looking like that might not be as large because some of our investment income is starting to return to normal, and I was pleased to see that this morning Napier Port announced its dividend, and the Regional Council will be receiving $5 million on that. So that helps deal with some of our shortfall. So it's all improving, but we still will be borrowing this year for our operating expenses. I don't know if this does this.
Pretty good, yes.
Yeah, so I was doing it now.
There we go. So just an update on where we're getting to in terms of supporting the economy. So we're up to over 1,000 businesses we've supported now with over $2 million in vouchers under the recognised seasonal employer, the Regional Business Partner Program, which is largely focused on small to medium businesses. We've finalised the contract with the Crown for the $20 million upgrade of the flood schemes in Wairoa, Hiritonga, Tukituki, and that contract requires us to contract with local businesses predominantly and focus on Māori employment. So we've got some KPIs that we need to meet in terms of Māori unemployment, and we do have Māori disproportionately represented in the 2,500 additional job seekers at the moment. And so we're going to be working closely with the Ministry of Social Development on placing workers into those projects. We've also signed the contract with the Crown for the expanded fencing program across the region, which between our money and the Crown's is $4.2 million. And again, there's an expectation that we create jobs for Māori. So we've got KPIs there that we're working on as well. We haven't yet signed the contract for the expanded Whakatipu Mahia program, but we're working with Rongamai Wahine Iwi Trust at the moment around just the governance arrangements. We're getting close to sorting that out, and then hopefully we'll have a contract signed, and that will provide wonderful opportunities for transitioning over time the governance of that program to mana whenua up there, and good employment opportunities on the peninsula as we continue to get closer and closer to the peninsula being predator-free. We're standing up the regional alliances, and hopefully everyone around the table is aware of the engagement that's happened with PSGs and with Tai Whenua around the governance for that. So the region's been awarded $11 million for Jobs for Nature in the biodiversity space, which is really exciting, but we've got to develop the projects and get funding approved via Wellington for each of those yet. So that work's underway, and our regional recovery managers working closely with Tash Romano in particular, based at Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, who's coordinating on behalf of Te Kahui Ohanga o Takitimu on the whole pipeline of jobs across the region that local government and central government funding's creating. So there's a huge amount of work going on around big public infrastructure. We've got a big swimming pool to be built at the sports park. We've got our projects. There's lots of construction work, and what we want to do is match up the work with people, particularly those who are unemployed. So that work's continuing at pace, which is great. Just getting to our core business here back at the Regional Council. So since lockdown, we're back into full BAU. We've just been doing a staff survey in the last 2 weeks, and the early results of that suggest the biggest issue in our place at the moment is workload. We've got this place running flat out across all fronts. Just acknowledge Petty's team in terms of Māori partnerships. So just a growing level of governance and operational support across everything we do for Māori partnerships, and this huge bow wave of work we've got coming in relation to Te Wai. So there's lots coming there, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. On the corporate side of running this place, long-term plan, which you know all about, we're replacing our whole finance system at the moment and rebuilding our chart of accounts. We've just reformed our way we interact with the public and replacing our phone system. We've got a whole new call centre model, so that's a big piece of work. And then we're growing as an organisation fast as well, so we're having to find more accommodation and expanding our footprint. So that's happening at the moment. Policy and planning team, kotahi, which includes also the Mohaka plan change. You'll hear more about that shortly, but that's a major piece of work. Tank is still, well and truly underway. Over 200 submissions we're working through, and we go to hearings in the new year. Outstanding water bodies hearings start on the 30th of this month, so that's imminent. And we also still have the water conservation order going on, and a huge amount of work at the national level around Te Mana o Te Wai, in particular, and freshwater reform. The science team is 100% dedicated to gathering all the evidence we're going to need for kotahi. That's all the science to underpin our decisions we're going to make collectively around land, water and coast, and all doing that in an integrated way. So we're taking a mountains to sea approach with the science and bringing all the available evidence together. So you, in partnership with us and with the Regional Planning Committee, can make those decisions about how we're going to manage all these taonga for the future. Just in the catchment space, so this is a really busy time for the biosecurity teams. Everything's growing flat out at the moment, so all the things we don't want, like Chilean needlegrass, old man's beard, all those sort of pest plants are in their flowering stages and what have you. So those teams are out night and day at the moment doing what they can. And you'll see in the operational report that we've got some possum numbers starting to climb in some areas, which Michelle referenced before. So there's a big lift and effort required in the biosecurity space. Biodiversity, we've got a whole bunch of projects, restoration projects on the go at the moment that continues to grow, and the Crown funding, while it's great to get more money, puts more pressure on our people to deliver more with sometimes the same number of people. Our erosion control program on farms has now started exceeding the budget available, so we're now seeing more demand from farmers to fence off, plant up areas than we can even cope with, and so our teams are absolutely flat out doing that, which is good news, but it's lots of hard work. The Tukituki land use consents, so just a reminder that we've got over 200 farmers that require a consent to farm from May next year, so there's a big body of work going on helping them to get across the line. And in the compliance space, we've been growing our enforcement capability, and we're now doing more enforcement than ever before. So at the top of the pyramid is our worst offenders where we prosecute, and we've got 15 prosecutions on the go at the moment, which is the most this council's ever done. So we're regularly in front of the Environment Court, and we hope to have some good successful prosecutions to talk about soon, and hopefully some good fines delivered to some folk, which sends some messages around things like fires and polluting our waterways and what have you. So we're just getting tougher and cracking down on those things. Then just in the asset space, so we've got those upgrade of the flood schemes, which is all about preparing for climate change. Coastal hazards work, Rex referred to that as well. And then our water security work going on in Hiritonga and in Ruitaniwha. And we've got a high level of engagement, regular engagement going at the moment with tangata whenua around how we're going to take those projects forward, which Pedi and Rex are sponsoring with PSGs and with Ngāti Kahungunu as well. So that continues, and just looking ahead, so the implementation of the freshwater reforms is a really big focus of our long-term plan, and Te Mana o Te Wai is at the centre of that. So Penny mentioned in the workshop that he's working through Ngā Kairapu at the national level, and I'm sitting on the freshwater implementation group with the leaders from Kahuiwai Maori and meeting with ministers next week. And so what we're saying, top priority for the government is to support us in giving effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. Two dimensions to that. One is training and guidance on how to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai for regional councils, for territorial councils in terms of their running of their Three Waters assets, for Taumata Arawai, which is the national Three Waters regulator that's just being set up now, and also for the freshwater commissioners. So everybody understands what Te Mana o Te Wai and giving effect to Te Mana o Te Wai means for the future of freshwater management. So that's number one. And then number two is supporting the engagement for iwi hapu in everything from the planning stage right through consents and monitoring and compliance as well. And Kahuiwai Maori are working with us on setting up Te Kupenga, which is a national network that they want to establish for marae hapu right up to iwi around the rollout of Te Mana o Te Wai. So we know who's where, who's got capability, who hasn't, who needs help, and we build a big national workforce for us to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai. So look, we're absolutely clear. This is the centre of our work going forward. And I guess the thing I would just note, perhaps at the bottom there, is that we have a huge amount of engagement to do over the next 3 years, flat out, with everybody around the state of our waterways, the land use which has created the state of our waterways, and what we're going to do to improve that over the next couple of decades. So it's a really big piece of mahi, and there'll be lots more discussion with this committee chair over the next few years, which is a perfect segue really into kotahi, which is the framework in which is going to take a lot of this forward, and Kerry can elaborate on that. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Questions for Theo?
Well,
Come on, comment.
A lot of work, isn't it?
Just through the chair, James indicated that in terms of just the staff within HBRC, it's sort of, we're wanting more out of the current resource. I guess the reality of this, particularly for this committee and for the Regional Planning Committee to some extent, is this is about more, not less. That's the reality of it all. And we do appreciate that we're only one in amongst those who put demands upon your time and upon your capability.
Any further questions for James?
Just a comment, Chair. Just a comment. I got pulled up out here, fellow doing needle grass on my property. Wonderful job. But one of the things because I'm paying out a lot of money too, but one of the things about it is action. And you're putting it up here in front of me. He's been doing this for a while for us. And a young fella, but he does it really well. And we're stuck at the back of the Hawke there. But I just wanted to make that comment. When I see that and I see your staff doing the action part, it adds up for me. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, I'll just mention this. A few months ago, I came to the council and saw Mike. I wanted to get a permit to do a burn off. Across the road, they were burning. I live on Farnan Road, so I'm close to the Clyde River. I couldn't get an exemption, and the reason why, I'm in the green area, and across the road was the brown area. It was weird. I couldn't understand it. Strange.
So Chair, I just acknowledge that there are lines on a map which were drawn, and the chairman has a view about those lines and whether they're appropriate. We will be reviewing those as part of the kotahi process, and it may well be that those lines will be found to be not all that sensible. So we will review that over the next couple of years, but acknowledge the problem.
Rick, did you want to comment on
I was
that?
just going to say, don't burn anything, mate.
What do you do with
Take it
your
across
branches
the
of
road and
trees?
burn it.
Take firewood out of it and dry it.
We can't afford mulches, as big mulches I've seen next door anyway.
Take it over to the fire.
Any further questions? So can I just ask if we can have these two reports, yours and Tamate's, supported to our secretaries, just so we can add them to our board pack so we've got a record of them. Other than that, can I ask for a move and a second, please, to receive all of the reports? Thank you, Paula, and thank you, Michelle. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Carried. With that, we're doing follow-ups. Back to item 6, page 17. And we are 15 minutes behind.
So Chair, we'll take these as read. I'm happy to take any questions on those. They're all either have been enacted or under action.
Are we happy to take those as read? No questions in regards to the follow-ups?
I have a question with regard the terms reference in the charter. We haven't signed it. We've approved it, but we haven't signed it.
They've been adopted, haven't
Yeah, no, we haven't
they? Yeah, physically signed them. Okay, I think that's something we'll take it offline.
Mechanics.
That's a follow-up action.
Any other questions and follow-ups? If not, move on a second, please.
Aye.
Thank you, Henry White. Thank you, Rose. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, carried. Moving along back to item 8, Kotahi, so it's the report.
Turns on and off. So you know which one is
Yeah,
yours.
it's the black one.
That one?
Yep, thank you. tātou. So I have provided you with a paper that was presented to the RPC earlier last month. And this is the presentation that I took them through, and it will just hopefully explain to you the policy and planning team's work program, and just provide you with a bit of an understanding as to how it's been developed and what we're proposing. So I will just step through the presentation. So as I explained to you in the workshop, sorry, just bear with me a moment. We've had the MPSFM enacted earlier this year, and that's put a time frame upon us of delivering our freshwater catchment plans of December 2024 to have those notified. So that has definitely been or is one of our current challenges. We're also due to review our regional resource management plan and our regional coastal environment plan. Both of those are scheduled to commence in 2021. So they are essentially our key drivers of change, but they are not in isolation. There are a number of other national policy statements that we need to adhere to. National environmental standards, there have been other amendments to the RMA, but it's just providing a bit of context there as to what informs our work program. And the national planning standards, which is the top bullet point there, is essentially a standard which is imposed upon all councils, which is trying to provide some, I guess, standardisation across all of the councils as to what a plan looks like, so that when the community pick those up, they know that it has the same kind of format from Taranaki to Hawke's Bay to Auckland. So alongside these drivers, there is also the RPC Act. So what we've done here is we've just set out a very graphic, I suppose, timeline of what's in front of us. This isn't comprehensive, but it just gives you a bit of a snapshot in terms of the amount of change that's upon us and what we need to be aware of and also address within our regional resource management plan. So the key one probably for discussion today is this red box here, which I've just explained to you in terms of notifying our freshwater plan changes by December 2024. But as you can see, there are other things that we need to give effect to or amend as a consequence of changes to legislation.
Kerry, I'd make just the additional observation for the committee that all of this avalanche of what we call national direction is all coming in response to the fact that for the last 30 years, under the Resource Management Act, we haven't done an adequate job looking after our coast, our water, our land. So all the chickens are coming home to roost now, and all this requirement's now coming on us to do this stuff a heck of a lot better, which is great, but it's all going to take a huge amount of work over the next few years.
And I think this refers back to what you've said earlier, is that it's not just our challenge, it's not just a staff challenge, it's actually our community, it's tangata whenua. We are not the only people who are deeply involved in this change. There are, within the MPSFM, there is a requirement to actively involve tangata whenua in the plan development. And we're very cognizant that that places a lot of pressure on tangata whenua, hence why we've indicated within our LTP proposals that we need further funding to support you all to be co-designing this plan with us, because otherwise it just won't work. Historically we've engaged, but we haven't had the funding to support that engagement, and that's just not going to be possible if we're to meet this deadline that the government set on, for us. We're just setting ourselves up to fail. This is just a bit of a snapshot, and I can provide this to you all just of the policy statements and environmental standards that are kind of the key drivers for our work program. But with the MPSF freshwater, obviously there's the NES and also stock access. But alongside that, there's marine aquaculture, etc. So, and this is the one that Rex is particularly interested in, is the NES for air quality. So, all of these environmental standards and policy statements will be, I guess, bundled up in terms of how we are addressing the environment in our regional resource management plan. So it's not just fresh water. And alongside all of the central government legislation, we have our own RPC Act, as you're all probably acutely aware of. And the purpose of the RPC Act is to oversee the development of our planning documents and then to implement that work program. So this was just highlighted back to the RPC, is that, again, we need them to be working alongside us. So between now and December 2024, we have, I think it's 20 regional planning committee meetings, which may sound like a lot, but in terms of actually making sure that we're on track with this plan delivery and the decision making, it is quite a significant burden on them as well, as our decision makers. And I apologise, I haven't worked out how many Māori committee meetings are in that time frame, but I think it would probably be, what was every 12? Yeah, 18 maybe, yeah. So in terms of the Regional Resource Management Plan, it is quite old. It was made operative in 2006. There have been a number of changes to that, but in terms of the freshwater catchment plans, the only operative freshwater catchment plan that we have is the Tuki. Obviously we've got the tank catchment plan that was notified back in May, but we are, it is still proposed at this stage. It's not operative. So there's a lot of work to be done. As Peri alluded to earlier, we have Mohaka, which we have re-engaged that piece of work, but we are still deficient in Wairoa, Esk, Parangaho, Southern Coasts and Mohaka in the delivery of our freshwater catchment planning. And we will also need to loop back round to Tank and Tuki to make them align with the MPSFM 2020 by that 2024 deadline. Sorry, there's a lot of dates in here. So we've done a lot of pre-work within our team, and just highlighted for you here the risks and constraints that we see in the delivery of any planning, whether it's under this specified time frame of December 24. Resourcing and capacity is obviously the biggest challenge here, I think. Particularly with COVID as well, we don't have the ability to resource beyond our borders anymore, unless people are returning home. And in terms of that active involvement of iwi, that is a significant constraint that we've highlighted, and as I alluded to earlier, the key reason why we are seeking additional funding. So within our kotahi program of work and our proposal for the LTP, we are seeking an additional 400,000 per annum, and that will be for us to be able to set up contracts with iwi in each of those catchments so that they can co-design those plans with us. Community expectations, that's obviously a key risk for us stepping into this program, because historically we've had long periods of engagement with our communities. Tank, for instance, started in 2012, and that stakeholder engagement took 6 years, and we just don't have the luxury of time anymore. So we need to manage our community's expectations around what engagement looks like now. It's going to be very, very different. It's not to say that we won't be engaging, because absolutely that is a necessity. It will just be very fast and furious. And that goes for our TLAs as well, because they are obviously stepping through their plan development. Our TLAs are all at different stages of their plans, and there will need to be an alignment. If we're reviewing our regional policy statement, they'll need to give effect to that. So there needs to be a close relationship with our TLAs so that they are working alongside us. And then, of course, we have a bunch of external factors which we really don't have any control over. But we do see this as being an opportunity. I think for us, the biggest thing for us is that when we were delivering freshwater catchment plans and engaging with tangata whenua and our communities, it was very ring-fenced to fresh water. And that hasn't necessarily worked very well for this organisation or for our communities, because it didn't give anybody the opportunity to talk about things like air or the coast. And for us, it's very hard to separate those elements of the environment, because it is the environment. So Kotahi will give us the opportunity to really give a genuine focus on that ki utu ki tai approach to the environment. So we're looking at the environment more holistically. The other element of that is obviously with the MPSFM, we must give effect to Te Manawa Te Wai, and historically it was in the MPSFM, but this gives it more weight.
What does that actually mean?
Sorry?
From
Te Manawa Te Wai.
No, what does give effect? What does that mean from?
So within the MPSFM, there are principles which are set out under Te Manawa Te Wai, and it explains, I haven't got all of these highlighted here, and I can't remember them all exactly off the top of my head, but in terms of that active involvement with tangata whenua in the plan development and in decision making, that's all very clearly expressed in the MPSFM. So there's also, they give examples of mana whakahonua rohi or transfer of powers. So it's exploring those options with tangata whenua, how we actively involve tangata whenua in not just the plan development, but ongoing, beyond, you know, the plan being operative.
And does Hawke's Bay Regional Council feel as though it's in the right space to engage at that level? This is a step up from what we would have.
It is a
normally
massive
done.
step up, and both for my team and Pierre's team, we're working very closely together. We're both also seeking additional internal staff, and what I'm aiming to be able to do is to have a planning lead, a science lead, a Māori partnerships lead, so that when we're in catchments, our communities will have that core set of people, a team if you like, a project team, so then they'll be dealing with the same people on a regular basis, so that the conversations aren't lost in terms of you know, change of staff, or, you know, one week they're dealing with me and the next it's, you know, somebody else. So it is a journey for us as well. This is not a way we've worked before, but we are incredibly enthusiastic about it. And for my team, this program of work, by bundling our program of work, we see it as a massive challenge, but in terms of an opportunity, it's a real big motivation for my team. And yeah, I can't talk for your team, but we are working very, very closely together.
Probably the other example is looking at Mohaka. And in Mohaka, the approach there is to actually sit down with tangata whenua and co-design, which is a wee bit different to where we've been previously.
And we know we're going to hit bumps in the road. Like any relationship, you know, if you hit the bump and come out of it the other side and you're still, you know, able to talk to each other and work through the the lumpy bits, then, you know, that's got to be a really positive thing, and that's what we're really aiming to do. With that time frame that I showed you, whilst it is very short, the focus for the first probably good 2 years is on relationship building with tangata whenua, on the co-design, rather than the actual delivery and the paperwork, if you like. It's those conversations. It's gathering information and, you know, listening to the stories and.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Oh, my mouse has disappeared. So we also recognise, as I said earlier, that this places an incredible burden on our iwi and our community. So we will be establishing those relationships, co-designing. We will be looking to embed tangata whenua values across throughout all the, you know, throughout the plan, but having consideration of the fact that those tangata whenua values in Mohaka will be different from Purongaho.
Question,
Yes.
Chair? Just a question. You know, just to say, if I was the expert of 50 years on the lake, I'm just asking the question, you know, will I be valued in terms of our whānau that hold a lot of mātauranga in these certain areas, can't go to these huis on, you know, just nothing. If we're talking, and I'm just putting value to it, if we're talking about real value and what we receive from council, if council's getting $100,000 from government, you know, I want to see what the split would look like for Paura to turn up to hui. Those huis that you're talking about true engagement. One will be about money and the other one's about mana. So that's how I see it anyway. And I'm just putting it out there.
Resourcing.
Yes.
Absolutely, and that's part of what this $400,000 that I'm seeking through the LTP is for, is to be able to have contracts with iwi so that we can resource their time to co-design. And we're also looking at reviewing our, what are we calling it, remuneration policies as well, how we can remunerate people for their time to be engaging in these processes.
It's a must. It's a must. That's all I'm saying.
I think we've probably touched on most of that, but in terms of within this organisation as well, you will have seen that list of 11 other projects that Desiree showed you this morning. We feel that kotahi is not going to rewrite everything. There are programs of work that sit outside of kotahi, but there needs to be alignment with those other work streams. And I think this really gives us a good opportunity to do that as well. We are, so kotahi, I've given this presentation to all of the staff as well. And, from the ladies who are dealing with the rates through to the science to, everybody is aware of this as our work program, because it will, whilst you may not be directly affected, everybody needs to be aware and on board with this, because it is enormous. And there are strong alignments too in terms of our climate smart recovery that you would have seen post-COVID. Again, with our climate emergency declaration, climate change will be woven through kotahi, because you can't separate that out from the environment. So it gives us that opportunity to bring our regional resource management plan into this era, because there is no reference to climate change in our current plan. And our strategic plan, which you've all had fairly strong involvement in, this won't replace our strategic plan, but those strategic objectives which are set will be reflected through this plan as well. And sorry, I do apologise, I should have changed the colour, you can't read this. This talks to the how. So in terms of our existing freshwater plan changes, as I mentioned to you earlier. Tuki is an operative plan change, and Tank has been notified. Both of those will need to be brought up to speed by December 2024 so that it aligns with the NPSFM, but we're not proposing to run those work streams first because there are catchments that we haven't been in yet. Mohaka, as I explained earlier as well, that's essentially our, I call it a pilot, but I suppose in that respect of co-design, it is a pilot, but it is our, hopefully going to provide us with a really strong framework on how we can run co-design processes in those other catchments. And hopefully once we've hit those bumps, we won't replicate them next time. And I think, again, I've really spoken to this, but in terms of the Ki Uta Ki Tai approach, and I think one way that we've been explaining it to people, and this was the way it was explained to me by Melanie, is that you can't, you have to think of the environment as a body, and you can't, fix a problem in one part without thinking about the other. The life, flows through the veins of the body, and you can't just focus on one element. So that's a really important aspect for us to deliver through the plan. We will be keeping a very close watching brief on changes to the Resource Management Act. You probably have all heard that this government are looking to do away with the Resource Management Act and bring forward new legislation. One of the key things, if this were to happen, would be delivery of spatial planning. And the way that kotahi is being delivered at this present time would enable us to actually build on that spatial planning element, so we wouldn't have to park all the hard work that we'll be doing around kotahi. It would just be a further piece of work supporting it. In terms of supporting iwi and community engagement, as we've already spoken about, we will be working alongside and in partnership with iwi on the plan development, managing those expectations again. It will be a very robust period of engagement, and the RPC will be critical to this piece of work because we will need to make sure that they're aware of progress that we're making, I guess at a project team level, and we will require their support. So we talked about co-design and around the Mohaka plan, and the co-design partners are the PSGEs, the obviously HBRC staff, and it will also be our elected members in those catchments. So when we're engaging with our wider communities, there will be fairly significant expectations on all of those co-design partners to be fronting and supporting kotahi. And I think that's probably it. Again, just showing you the time frame. And as I said, this first couple of years is where we'll be developing those relationships or maintaining where we've got really good pre-existing relationships, gathering information, and then towards the end of that we'll be looking to start reviewing and writing that. We are aiming to have a pre-notified draft in the November of 2023. We see that as being a very interactive pre-notified draft. We're looking to do something a little bit different, more agile. I would say watch this space. At this stage it's very conceptual, but we've seen other councils run these pop-up type consultation days and weeks where they've had the community actually suggesting amendments, and things are being redrafted, so it's very sort of real time. But then we'll be looking to consult further during the early stages of 2024, and then look for a decision from RPC to consult more formally around the June, August, that period, the following year, so that we can notify that in November 2024. So it's going to be a very compressed time frame, nothing like we've ever done before. It won't replicate what we've done in Toki or Tank, and I can only hope that it will be better for all of us, despite the challenge of time.
So,
Did you
kia
want
ora
to add
for that.
anything?
Kia ora. Perhaps if I could just add to that. So the Maori Partnerships team is sort of in this boots and all alongside Kerry and the planning team. And one of the emphasis that was put in here was about partnering and also around co-design, but in particular around developing the relationships. So for those of you from Wairau, you'll be well aware of a face that's sitting in behind there. It's Nathan Heath. We're fortunate that Nathan Heath has come on board as our relationships manager and coordinator in the northern part of the area. One of the FTEs, one of the people that we're looking for in the LTP process is to replicate that role across the southern area in anticipation of Poranga Hau and, well, Esk as well, and Southern Coast. So relationships is a big part of this, but there's a real face in the room. And through Mohaka, Nathan's already engaged in Mohaka, and in time, as we get to it, we'll move into that expanse of Te Wairau.
Thank you, Mike. How do you intend to engage with iwi in the community through this order that's come out? You know, I think the people need to know firsthand, you know. It's hard enough, in my case, to take this corridor back to talk to my people. But I think it's only fair that maybe there's some effort made to probably gather on our people on the marae somewhere and have a talk with them. It's a bit easy because we've got a lot of young people out here now, and he te mātou te wana hoki rata, they all got it up here, a lot of them, even though some of them aren't working, but it's all there. And they can pick up all this corridor that's being given to us today here, right across the whole spectrum of our rohe roku or te mataua Māori. So I just wanted to know how would you set up having that engagement with iwi, and the community in general, I suppose.
Wait tēnā pātai, Uncle. And perhaps I could start, and Kerry might want to fill
Well,
the gaps.
the other thing I want to get back at this, some things happened like this once before, and that's how Pika Pika came about being set up. But the water from Pika Pika starts from Te Hawke, from the lake. It's all that water that's under the lake, and it follows that stream all the way out down to Karamu Stream, and out to the Tuki River. But every marae along that waterway must have a say in this matter, because at the time that they set up Pika Pika, the approach was only made to one marae, and I'll keep talking about that because we fought hard for it at home, not without arguments with our young people, but it left us to deal with that matter. Even though what we see now is good, but it's how the process they went about doing it, especially spraying those willows. A lot of our eels were died off, the bird life had gone. They come back eventually, but I don't know so much about our eels. But these things need to be taken out to the people, and everyone that lives along that waterway needs to be spoken to, and not just one person.
Perhaps I can start, and Kerry will add to this.
Okay.
So I guess what's critical in this as we move through a planned process is the Regional Planning Committee. And I think we're working on a catchment approach. And so within each one of those catchments, we have representatives, appointees in the Regional Planning Committee. And so we would be approaching them in the first instance and sitting down and looking at what the expanse of the catchment who's in there in terms of tangata whenua. So an example of that is working through Pāhau Wera. We've become well aware in terms of the co-design approach as to all of the tangata whenua that are engaged in it, including other PSGs, but also the landowners, Maori land trusts and the like. So there's quite a list of different representatives in there, but our first approach is through the PSGs to make those connections and understand what that looks like.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I follow up from Uncle Hame?
And then to Hanuai.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Just because Uncle Hame had talked about engagement, and I had a bit of anxiety when you talked about the pop-ups and the agile, and I'm hoping that that won't be applied to tangata whenua. So I understand the bundle of work and the timelines that you're being pushed to, but I don't recommend that agile approach with us, because you also talked about these relationships, and relationships can't be built based on time, on timelines that we're being pushed to, and if we're cutting the fat in order to be agile, don't trim the fat around us, our relationship, because
No, that certainly is not the intention. So the way that we see that occurring is that the co-design with tangata whenua will have occurred for the 2 years leading up to that, and that will be our pop-up style pre-notification consultation with the community. So that will allow those parts of the community that we've not been able to reach, that aren't tangata whenua, that haven't been involved in the plan development, to have an opportunity to have a say as well. So no, that's certainly not the intention. So we'll be working in partnership with tangata whenua up to that point, and then also beyond that point. So no, that certainly was not the intention.
Kia ora kōrua, thanks Kerry for your presentation. I've got two types of questions. The first being point 20. It talks about no extra new science developed under Kotahi Plan. And so if you could explain a bit more around that, and part B to that point is, does that include mātauranga Māori, new science, or science? And then the second question is, you talked about valuing tangata whenua perspective in the co-design and the resourcing that through contracts. Do you perceive that that will include those mana whenua groups being able to decide a planner, ecologist, not just engagement for their co-design? Yeah.
So first question, in terms of the no new science,
Yeah.
For our science team to be able to run to this program, what this means is that we won't be embarking on new projects, new research, new modelling, because as Joanne says, through Tank, they had developed some science, and then we needed more science, so everything paused for a number of years, and then the science caught up, and so that historically has delayed the planning process. So the intention is that the science team will continue with their business as usual, so they'll still be undertaking state of environment reporting and the monitoring and all of those things that they would ordinarily do, but we won't be embarking on anything that's not currently programmed. So if we identify through the course of the plan development, through those conversations, that there is something that needs to be done, that will be programmed for beyond this LTP 3-year time frame. So it will be a milestone in the future. So the one thing that I failed to mention is that with Kotahi, one thing that we are aiming to do is to undertake more regular, or have that ability to undertake more regular reviews of the plan, because historically the RMA requires us to review a plan within 10 years. But where we've had plan changes, we've been able to delay that process. But the anticipation is that, or the expectation is that we'll be undertaking that review cycle more regularly, more frequently, so that we can pick up elements where we need to change, whether that be to incorporate new science or if there's a component like we had with Tuki where the numbers were no longer correct and we had an outdated overseer reference, that we can review those more frequently and make those changes more easily. So in terms of no new science, it's not that they're not doing anything or collecting new data, so that will still occur because that's their kind of core work. It will be that we're not embarking on anything over and above what is currently scheduled within their work program.
So, Chairman, yeah.
The existing science wouldn't, because the second question was around Mātauranga Māori.
Yes.
That's a requirement of Te Mano Te Wai and then PSFM. So I guess the impact on existing science would be how that's tested complementary in terms of Mātauranga Māori and Mahi Ngākai.
Dick?
Yeah, that was just my point, I don't, for me, it's quite clinical, this thing, but I'm just giving my view from it. We really need to focus on, what we want out of this. And our Mātauranga Māori science is really, really important. So when you start fronting up with this stuff, at community level, you're going to have to make sure the answers are correct when we're talking about the science. Because our people will just,
Well, I think in terms of being correct, we don't hold the Mātauranga Māori. We don't certainly don't say that we do that, but I think as Petty's alluded to, we are required to incorporate that, so that will be part of that conversation. I certainly wouldn't be telling you how we incorporate that. I would have the conversation with you, and I would need to have an education and an understanding.
I'm only worried here because that doesn't describe to me the Mātauranga Māori. That doesn't. I'm just putting it on the table. That right now, I'm sharp enough to think I haven't come to many meetings, but I'm looking at that, I'm getting mixed feelings. I'm getting mixed feelings. That's what the old fella's saying. We don't want to get mixed feelings at the start. That's all I'm trying to portray here.
Okay. Thank you for that. So just summing up, the time is moving on. So look, we appreciate that. We've learnt from lessons of the past, especially in regards to tank and the process we've used there, and how we can improve on the engagement with tangata whenua with iwi. We absolutely appreciate that. We appreciate the co-design. I particularly want to touch on the fact that you're prepared to work with, I think, TLAs and getting more of a regional approach in regards to the upcoming standards that we're all going to have to reach, because we end up having to engage with everybody. If we can get all of our TLAs to work together, it saves us having to have 5 different conversations or 5 same conversations with various territorial authorities. That's when we become oha with the whole process. I think the other part is making sure that from our point of view as mana whenua, tangata whenua, that we identify our champions in this space, because that's who they need to engage with. We need to ensure that they engage with those ones. So identifying those that have our thing Mātauranga Māori. It's no good keeping them on the side. They need to be engaged. So, and supporting our regional council team into being able to access the whānau to have the engagement. So how do we help them to engage us? That's the other part we need to do this. So we look forward to how you navigate that space. We look forward to see how quickly we see you engage with us.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Ka pai?
Ka pai.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add further that on the 9th of December, we are holding a workshop in the morning for Māori Standing Committee and the RPC combined. That's 10 till 12, and that's on Te Mano Te Wai. We have Ricky Allison coming to talk to you all.
Thank you for that. Ka pai. Thank you. So we're moving along to item 9, climate. climate response, Hawke's Bay Regional Council's response to climate change. You have 12 minutes.
Who's going to lead the presentation? So it's a combined paper.
Like you did.
Wait, what's that?
When you look up there, it's already been talked about on the side, and they'll say, no, it hasn't.
Chair, just as Jenny and Rebecca come to the front, I'd just make the observation. What we've tried to do in this paper is bring together a number of streams of council work in relation to climate change into one paper and one picture for you, because there's lots going on in this space. So I'll pass to the team and they can introduce themselves. Start with you, Rebecca.
Tēnei te mihi kia koe, ko Rebecca Ashcroft Cullen tōku ingoa. E whānau mai ahau kei whanganui ātara, engāre kei hera taunga ahau e noho ana. He kai tohu whakapā ahau kei te kaungihira arohi o te mātou Maori. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jenny Kilwin toko ingoa, ko te mātou maunga, tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kathleen ahau, Principal Scientist Air.
So this is a three-pronged paper. So we'll be starting off with Kathleen talking about, words gone. What are you talking about?
A fairly comprehensive report that we've had done, both with Gisborne Council on the climate change impacts for both ourselves and the Gisborne area. So essentially that you've got hopefully a summary of the impacts and the reports that you've read, and so I previously did a very long presentation, but seeing as we haven't got a lot of time, essentially the main points raised in that report is certainly a need to be prepared for more extremes, heavier rainfall, but also droughts as well. They're predicting soil moisture deficit, an increase in soil moisture deficit days in this region, and some of the highest increases compared to the sort of the national picture. So the east coast of the North Island is looking to get more droughts. Certainly, sea level rise is also a big issue for this region, and again, something we certainly need to be thinking about and preparing for. So it is the most comprehensive report on the impacts that we've had done to date, and is going to be there to feed into not just our council but the other councils' decision making. I'll then take questions on that report.
Can you not get it?
Yeah, no, we can, but this is for our climate change.
Oh, right, yeah. Sorry.
I've got well, it's not so much a question, but a comment, because earlier on we had a long-term plan workshop and all the proposals, new proposals that we're going out to the community about. So it's just it's connecting what you've presented in terms of climate change and what's going to happen to our environment in the future, and connecting that with the proposed works coming through the long-term plan, like right tree, right place, in terms of mitigating our carbon emissions. It's about our flood protection, because we know those occurrences and incidents are going to happen more frequently. And then it's also around our education, which we're going to hear from our two ladies now. So there is that connection of what you're presenting, the science of it, and what is coming ahead of us in the long-term plan, and what those proposals are doing to address those effects of climate change. Yeah. Kia ora.
Chair, just on that, I wonder whether there's a future discussion for this committee around how we blend, I guess, mātauranga in the climate and seasonal space, also with our climate science, and how we engage tangata whenua in the science and issues of climate change. some guidance from this committee in the future would be helpful. So if we plant that seed today and have wānanga perhaps in the new year around that, that would be very helpful.
Just follow up on that, with Mātauranga Māori, a lot of it's observation, and you'll notice, and I hear our people talking about, oh, Mānuka's flowering a bit early, you know, oh, this is still happening, blah blah blah. It's all out of season, so we've noticed that for years. So he's got a good point.
Hold up.
For me, my question to the scientists is, what just happened? Is that you've got here's a real case here. Nature just dropped 260 mils on tamate. Tell me about that.
That's what's expected under climate change, essentially.
With relation to this, all these facts and figures here, give us a picture of that, real. What happened?
Well, in that particular scenario, there was a collision of two weather systems. But it's just that with the warmer temperatures, you get more evaporation. So there's more moisture kind of being held in the air. And when the conditions are right, then it dumps it, essentially. And so that is the concern. So as temperatures increase,
So that's what's happening with climate change now. We're going to get more of those sorts of things.
Yeah,
and it's important for us to do what?
We need to, that's part of the sort of the whole long-term planning, is as to what extent we invest to secure ourselves against that sort of thing. And what do we do as part of the global community to mitigate our carbon footprint?
Only a comment. You know, the indigenous cultures like Maori have talked about it for a long time. And it's really now about leadership, from my perspective, this discussion. We know what the science is in a way, but now who's going to stand up? Who's actually going to stand up? Yeah.
We are.
Perfect segue to.
Kathleen, it's going to rain next week again, is it?
Oh, there's bits and pieces, yeah.
Well, I'd say.
So what would be the final thing you would want to message to us?
That I think you all know that it's real, that it's something that we all need to face, and that, you know, in your thinking in the long-term planning, that you keep that in mind, and that the council is doing a lot, and we've got our strategic goals, so just keeping on that path to those strategic goals that we have in relation to climate change.
No? So no further questions? Okay, thank you guys. Sorry about compressing your time, but given
So
our...
we've just got to go to this with the other presentation. Sorry, Chair, if we can. Yep. So, which is part of this item. We're getting a bit squeezed on time.
So we've got 8 minutes? We can do it. Okay.
7.
Okay.
Ladies' name?
It's Kathleen, Dr. Kathleen Cosina.
Climate Action Campaign?
Hold on. So we're actually about 2 weeks or just over 2 weeks into this campaign currently, which is really a communications campaign, but I think Hanawai was correct in saying that it has a big educational component to it as well. And what we want to do with this campaign is, what we are doing with this campaign is positioning the council as a lead local authority on the climate crisis. And we're doing that through a number of ways, really talking to the comprehensive activities that the council's already underway with in this, with reacting in response to climate change, and we're localising the crisis. We're trying to localise the crisis in a meaningful way that will connect with people in our community. And yeah, and alongside this as well, we're trying to encourage people to just think about what they can do, some steps that they can take, and also businesses as well. So yeah, we've got a number of key messages with this. I won't run you through all of them, but really just strongly going out there and saying this is the biggest environmental challenge of our time, and it's obviously impacting us in several ways. And the NIWA report that came out was a really useful document in really localising that here. And obviously we're seeing these impacts through sea level rise and an increase in volatile weather like storms and droughts. And so obviously last week's storm was a perfect representation of what we're facing and what can happen, and that was really, and we responded to that and built that into our communication with the community. Yeah, over to Rebecca.
So the campaign started a few weeks ago and it runs for 6 weeks, and the strategy of the campaign is pretty simple. We're trying to use stories, we're trying to use kōrero to engage with whānau in our community, using key messages that Jenny's talked about, and science to really support people and enable them to make change. And this campaign is really the start of a much bigger educational and engagement piece with the community that will happen through our long-term plan and ongoing. And we're focused on these 3 audiences: whānau and community, business and rural, because we wanted to empower whānau and communities to be able to make change. And we chose business because when it comes down to it, they're often just whānau and families trying to get bread on the table and look after their kids. And farmers, we know, are on the front line of change and they can make the biggest impact. So that's why we chose those 3 groups.
So to the what, we're doing a number of things. So we sort of launched with the results of a survey that we commissioned to 800 residents around Hawke's Bay that you may have seen. There was a fair bit of coverage in the paper about that. And that shows that, I'll just highlight some of the stats. So 90% of people believe that climate change is already occurring in Hawke's Bay, and then 62% are concerned about the impacts of that on the region. Drinking water and waterways was of the highest concern, followed by climate change, concern for future generations was the main driving force for taking part in environmental action. 41% of people associated the Regional Council as the main organisation responsible for actions on climate change, we also asked them about whether they'd be prepared to pay more to mitigate climate change, and there was 55% of people are prepared to pay more than with the most popular initiative was planting trees. So the other things we're doing, we've got a web hub on our Regional Council website, which it's like a one-stop shop. It's got all our statistics, videos, guides, and relevant links. We've profiled We've done 3 case studies that covers rural business and community, and we're going to just show one of them soon. And we are in the midst. We are having pop-up stores. So we've had one in Wairoa and Hastings, Napier, and we're going to Hastings and Waipokoro. And these have been, from our perspective, quite useful as to engage people who maybe wouldn't normally come to a more formal gathering. So we've been able to kind of sort of gauge people's views on the street, which has been great. So we'll continue with those. And we've also partnered with our Youth Environment Council, who've produced some videos for this.
We've developed some imagery. We wanted really striking imagery to get at people and hopefully not shock them, but get them interested and engaged and start talking. So we've got these two images that we're using at the front of the campaign. And at the pop-up stores, we're wearing horrifically bright orange t-shirts, and they seem to work quite well at attracting people. So, as I said earlier, and this is the long term of a much bigger education and engagement campaign, and the pop-ups are a great way of getting feedback of what people think and how we should be targeting our communications and what we should be educating people about. Yeah, so thank you.
Any questions?
I have one. Two actually. 41% said that Regional Council were the mainstay in this. What did the others say? Where'd the other
They
60%?
said the Ministry for the Environment, Hastings District Council, Napier City Council, Department of Conservation, I think. Yeah,
But
yeah.
the next closest to us was Ministry for the Environment, and they were less than half. So we are the most recognised leader of climate change
Well,
in
less
the
than
region.
41% in other words.
But they will make up. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So my other question is, if you want me to come to a pop-up, do you have XXL bright t-shirts?
We do indeed.
We do.
Party
We do
mine. See you on
size
Saturday.
fits
Didn't you?
anybody, yeah.
They have a
It'll be
centre
waiting
suit
for
in
you.
that size too.
Can you,
You can call
can
on
you
me
click on the long term again? This one, so
Yes, of course. Oh, we did try
that little girl up the front with the sunshine, that's my baby.
Oh.
And that's at Waitai Reserve in Wairau with her friend at the back. Just as we walked into the reserve, the sun was coming through, so the photographer.
Beautiful. If there's time, we didn't play the video of Ngāhere Nursery up in Wairoa, if you wanted to see.
You can have that during lunchtime.
Yeah, perfect.
This is the Maori committee. Hey, uncle, ka tahanu mai te whakaata nei kei ringo ta tāua nei reo. Koe rā mātou nei kia mihi ki te tokotoru nei, e tīmata hia kei ringo te kupu reo. I just wanted to acknowledge that what ignited this discussion was the language, the introductions to take a few steps in the reo. And on behalf of the Māori committee, I just wanted to acknowledge, and Kathleen, but to acknowledge you all in terms of the way that you introduce yourselves.
No further questions, eh?
Yeah, just,
sorry.
Hi ladies, kia ora. Your engagement with the community, how are you getting on with the schools?
Well, yeah, for this specific campaign, we haven't engaged primary schools as such, but we certainly, the Youth Environment Council, who we're partnering with, they've made up from representatives from a number of secondary schools in Hawke's Bay, so they've been part of that. And so that's probably...
At the same time as this, our environmental educator held a camp up at Lake Tūtera and had local schools come along, and we actually had 5 tamariki from the local Wairoa primary school come along to our Wairoa pop-up, so that was awesome, because they were drawing on the footpath and chalk, and it was really good.
A lot of our primary schools have been engaged in climate change over the years. I was just thinking about something that happened in primary school fraternity a few years ago. When we were talking about smoke-free environments, we had competitions, where we got our rangatahi to come along, and they were able to present in Te Reo Māori and also English. We had a competition. You could perhaps do something like that, not only at high schools, but at our primary schools. And I love to help you do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Kia ora.
Any final questions? If not, thank you very much. Can I ask for a mover for item 9, item 8 and 9, kotahi and the climate change response? Thank you, Zach and Roger. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried.
Oh, no, I was going to
With that, whānau, Uncle, can you want to do our grace, please? Just behind the door, just behind the thing there. She's ready to go. Just say our grace, Uncle.
E o whakapai me tō mātou kai, e ronga mō tō mātou tinana, whangai ki te whātua wairu ki te taro o te ora, Māngai anō hei te utupo mai, ai nei a kinea.
Hi, kia ora, Uncle. And we're happy if we can play that during lunch, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure.